Hello and welcome to my channel NBSoundHopperUK, and the subject of this video will be post-punk debut albums 1978 to 1980, my favourite 10. Punk, the much-needed shot in the arm of the UK music scene, made its presence felt during the second half of 1976 and throughout 1977. However, in and of itself, it was quite limited sonically, and this led to the gradual emergence of bands and artists who took the punk sound or attitude and developed it in several different directions. And it's this divergence that became known as post-punk. The period between 1978 and 1980 saw a myriad of debut albums on both major and independent labels, which helped establish the genre and paved the way for how a lot of music in the UK and beyond would sound during the 1980s. That's the background, so let's crack on. Number 10 is Jeopardy by The Sound. After the demise of punk band The Outsiders, Adrian Borland's new band The Sound released Jeopardy in 1980. Borland, the singer, guitarist and main songwriter, was joined by Graham Greene on bass, by Marshall on keyboards and Michael Dudley on drums. This album is in a similar vein to what Joy Division were doing, but with less bass and more keyboards. Nevertheless, Borland was the focal point, and his lyrics give the sense of someone struggling with his personal demons. Opening track I Can't Escape Myself is the most obvious example, with Desire, the title track, and Hour of Need also in that bracket. Words Fail Me and Heyday are both up-tempo and energetic, with Borland's punk roots coming to the fore. Missiles is the standout track for me, one which would remain popular in their live set. Ninth is Entertainment by Gang of Four from 1979. Gang of Four from Leeds clearly fit within the boundaries of post-punk, but angular and occasionally dissonant guitar plus the influence of funk illustrated how diverse post-punk could be. Lyrics were an important part of the overall package, with controversial subject matter. Ether, the punchy first track, gets straight in there, referring to the troubles in Northern Ireland and conditions at the H-blocks in the Maze prison. Traditional gender stereotypes are spotlighted on the Superb Damaged Goods, as well as on Contract and Not Great Men. They nearly enjoyed, if that's the right word, a few minutes on Top of the Pops with their single At Home He's a Tourist, but their refusal to change the line and the rubbers you hide in your top left pocket meant the appearance was shelved. 5:45 is my favourite track of the album's 12, a very uncompromising view on news programmes. 40 minutes of challenging sounds and subjects. Eighth is A Scream by Siouxsie The Banshees from 1978. Although around since 1976 and a familiar name on the London scene, Siouxsie and the Banshees, whether by accident or design, probably benefited from not releasing their debut until late 1978. The initial wave of punk was over and was fracturing into several directions. Whilst The Scream has, without doubt, more than a trace of punk about it, there is far more besides. For a start, the rhythm section and rhythmic structures are more central to the overall sound. The jagged guitar owes more to Noise Negative Land than to Raw Power by Iggy and the Stooges, and Siouxsie Sue was a commanding and charismatic singer. There's plenty of atmosphere in the sound as well. Pure, Switch and Overground are examples. It was very well received upon release, and that's understandable when, in addition to the tracks I've mentioned, you've got stuff like Jigsaw Feeling, Suburban Relapse and Carcass as well. A solid forward-thinking album. Seventh is Waiting for a Miracle by the Comsat Angels from 1980, the first of 3 albums they released on Polydor Records. Even though it has a feel of a band still finding their feet, Waiting for a Miracle is a debut that gives a taster of their songwriting ability and the potential which would be realised on their following 2 albums. Songs like Independence Day, Total War, Missing in Action, Postcard and Baby are all fantastic. Guitarist and vocalist Stephen Fellows has a voice which I've always found pleasing on the ear, and his lyrics are well constructed and have a nice, unforced flow. The guitar is cleverly worked to balance with fellow singing, so you don't end up with elaboration in the studio which couldn't be repeated when played live. Andy Peake's keyboards are economical and understated, but an essential component. Mick Glacier on drums and Kevin Bacon on bass give the tracks a solid spine without getting too flashy. The pounding rhythm of On the Beat makes it my favourite track. Well, this week at least. Sixth is the Psychedelic Furs by the Psychedelic Furs from 1980. The album starts atmospherically, in near ambient fashion in fact, with the track India before it explodes into life. It soon becomes evident that in Richard Butler they had a singer whose rasping voice would ensure that a Psychedelic Furs song was instantly recognisable. It's the kind of voice that has me on the verge of wanting to clear my throat on his behalf. With two guitarists and a saxophonist, the songs are quite layered, behind which bassist Tim Butler, brother of Richard, and Vince Eli on drums make for a robust driving duo. Sister Europe, the melancholic second track, was released as a single to not that much attention. A surprising choice of single when more up-tempo tracks like Flowers, Fall, Wedding Song, or even an edit of India might have had a wider appeal. Mind you, the lively side 2 opener, We Love You, had earlier been released as a single to no avail either. Despite that, it's a fine album, and Richard Butler's at times acerbic lyrics add a dash of humour. Fifth is Killing Joke by Killing Joke from 1980. Killing Joke attracted a loyal, although not massive, following thanks to what seemed like the sound of a dystopian breakdown of society. War Dance, Complications, and The Wake, a much copied, if not covered, track in the following years, provide up-tempo thrust. The others being slow to mid-tempo with plenty of grinding guitar riffs and at times tribal rhythms. The album gets off to a flyer with Requiem, beginning with an ominous mechanical synth splurge that oozes from the speakers before the rest of the band comes in. It's a superb track and is followed by a reworked version of their earlier single, War Dance. The album version's slightly slower tempo, more metallic guitar, dissonant synth, and electronically treated vocals give the song a new lease of life without taking away the football terrace chant of the chorus. Other highlights are Tomorrow's World and SO36. Both are slower tracks and both are brilliantly executed. In time, this album became very influential on industrial metal, but in 1980, Killing Joke occupied a place all of their own. Fourth is Real Life by Magazine from 1978. Upon leaving Manchester punk band Buzzcocks, vocalist Hal Devoto joined up with John McGeoch on guitar and saxophone, Barry Adamson on bass, Dave Formula on keyboards, and Martin Jackson on drums to create Magazine. Real Life was one of the first albums to be described as post-punk with its more ambitious sound and sophisticated songwriting. Keyboards or guitar carry the main melodies, sometimes interchangeably on individual tracks, for example on Motorcade and The Great Beautician in the Sky. Definitive Gaze opens the album, and with Barry Adamson's bass playing being in the foreground, it was indicative of how important that instrument was to become for post-punk bands. Shot by Both Sides was a modestly successful single, reaching number 41 in the UK charts, along with a performance on Top of the Pops. For guitar fans, The Light Pours Out of Me would probably be the standout, but every track has its plus points. Third is Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division from 1979. Gasp, shock, horror. Unknown Pleasures doesn't end up as my number one. Pardon my sarcasm. Even so, an outstanding debut that rightly gets a lot of praise. Production is not normally something I crap on about, but in the case of Martin Hannett, his contribution to Joy Division sound can't be underestimated. It transforms a relatively ordinary sounding post-punk band, when they were known as Warsaw, into a far more interesting outfit. In particular, it helps emphasise the often bleak lyrics of singer Ian Curtis. With the rest of the band, there's a discipline in the playing that almost makes each track a classic one. My own favourites are New Dawn Fades, Day of the Lords, and Interzone. Peter Hook's bass playing is especially prominent, and over the next 5 years or so, you could easily tell that bass players in a huge number of bands were fans of his. Second is Crocodiles by Echo and the Bunnymen from 1980. While singer Ian McCulloch's lyrics can be rather moody and angsty, they don't have the same sense of futility and resignation that you got with Joy Division. Will Sargent's guitar style borders on jangly in places, Stars and Stars and The Excellent Rescue, for instance. In fact, I'd say there's a 60s feel to it that brings to mind The Doors, The Seeds, and the 13th Floor Elevators, amongst others. Drummer Pete DeFreitas and bass player Les Pattinson are rock solid and propel a large percentage of Crocodiles. The title track and All That Jazz are examples. Favourite tracks? Well, all of them. Opening track Going Up sets a standard that's maintained right throughout the album. On the 2003 CD reissue, the bonus material includes Simple Stuff and Do It Clean, a couple of tracks that match the calibre of what's on the original album. Number 1 is Laughing Academy by Punishment of Luxury from 1979. Off-kilter, humorous, and going against the conventional music paper wisdom of the time meant that Punishment of Luxury, or Punnilux for short, were pretty much doomed to fall between the cracks. Laughing Academy was released on the United Artists label to great critical indifference. The unusual approach of combining punkish energy with arrangements closer to prog, the complete antithesis of what was expected from new bands in the late 1970s, didn't help them. On the track Obsession, you even get what sounds like Mellotron being used, The Heretics. Obsession and Puppet Life, both tales of madness, are funny and disturbing in equal measure. Funk Me, British Baboon, Babylon, and The Message keep things suitably strange. Radar Bug / Metropolis has the kind of arrangement that would be found on Cardiac's album several years later. Excess Bleeding Heart, All White Jack, and the title track are the remaining songs on what I consider to be a top-notch album, despite what the critics thought. There we are then. Not an easy 10 to pick in the face of fierce competition from the likes of the Pop Group, the Associates, and many, many more. It was a very fertile period. There are links to a song from each of the 10 albums I've spoken about in the video description. Many thanks to anyone who has subscribed since the last one. If you've not done so, details of all that kind of stuff are displayed at the end of this video. In the meantime, if you've made it this far, thanks for watching.